Thank you for tuning in to the Voice of the Victim podcast. We discuss a lot of sad and potentially triggering things on this show. We try to be as sensitive and cautious as possible, but if you are sensitive to things involving abuse and may be triggered, please think twice before listening to our show.
Welcome to the Voice of the Victim podcast. I'm Ryan.
And I am Rosie.
How are you doing today, Rosie?
I'm good. Just worked out, the sun is shining, feeling very zen and chill. How about you?
Yeah, I'm also very happy the sun's out. There was a couple of dark, cold weeks there, but yeah, can't complain about the sun being out. Getting that vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get started, we want to thank our new patron, Grace.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you so much, Grace. We also have a new premium Patreon episode out now. It'll be out before this episode airs.
Mm-hmm.
That's the 20th premium episode. And
Burrito would like to say hello.
I think last week or the week before.
It was the week before, I believe. When we talked about MK Ultra.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Esther Schreier. It's the follow-up to that. So we go into more detail about exactly what was going on with that whole situation. So go check that out if you're curious. We have 20 story-based Patreon premium episodes over there now. So
right, and that doesn't count like all the extra little things we have on there.
Yeah, the riff-raff, as you call it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, let's jump into this listener story.
Okay.
We're sharing the story of Imogen this week. And we're just going to read it in her own words because she wrote it very well. So,
all right.
This episode of Voice of the Victim podcast is sponsored by Podcorn. Rosie and I are very passionate about what we talk about on this show, but it takes a lot of time and energy to make it.
Sponsors help us be able to work less at our other jobs and spend more time making the show the best it can be.
When we thought about finding sponsors, we really didn't know where to begin. It was very intimidating, but Podcorn made it possible for even us to find sponsors.
Mm-hmm. Podcorn is a simple and easy-to-use marketplace that connects podcasters directly to sponsorship opportunities. And there's no middleman, so podcasters can choose what their specific rate is and collaborate directly with brands.
And I also like that we can choose the type of ad we want to do, because I don't like ones that completely throw off the tone of the episode and feel jarring. And I love being able to create our own host-read ads like the one you're hearing right now.
Plus, you don't have to give up creative control or rights to your podcast to use Podcorn. And the people that work there are always willing to help and work with you to make the process painless.
And they secure funds before you even start working on the ad to make sure that you're paid when you're done.
The marketplace mission of Podcorn is to give podcasters transparency, creative freedom, and full control of how and when they monetize their hard work.
And we know podcasters work hard. So if you're a podcaster of any size, click the link in our show notes to sign up to Podcorn and start browsing opportunities to find your own sponsors.
So Imogen starts out with this. I grew up in a normal, happy family. I was born in mainland Europe to British parents and then moved to England when I was still very small. My father was in the military. Weirdly, I have very vivid memories from ages 3 to 5 when we lived on the military base. I remember our house, the area we lived in, the friends I had, and when my younger sister was born. These are all happy memories, and I find it funny that I have such vivid recollections from living there, yet my memories from my older childhood and teenage years are fuzzier and a little mixed up.
I was born in the late 80s with my twin. We were very premature and spent a long time in hospital with our mom. I have no proof, but I think a traumatic start in life made not only my twin and I very close, but us and our mom too. We've always been close and are still to this day.
We had a normal dad in the military life early on. We moved a few times, then my dad left the military after my younger sister was born. We then settled in a town not far from both my parents' families, a town I still lived in today. I love it here.
I went to normal primary school from ages 4 to 11, and then high school, had the same group of friends throughout both. Some of these friends I'm still close with today. I'm 34 as of writing this.
I never really had any experiences with relationships or boyfriends, girlfriends while in school until my final year in high school at age 16. This wasn't something I lamented in any way. I was just more concerned with having fun with my friends and going to concerts than I was in pursuing anything romantic with any classmates. Sure, there were a few people I had crushes on and such through school, but I wasn't overly bothered.
I respect that.
I'm a little jealous that she was 16 when she graduated. A little different over here. I did have a boyfriend when I was 16. He was in college. Here in the UK, college is 2 years after high school, so ages 16 to 18. Then university is 18 plus. Man, they have it figured out over there. I love that.
Fascinating.
This awarded me certain cool points with my peers, but again, I really wasn't too invested or interested more than my interest in concerts and rock stars. The relationship was nothing more than two friends who kissed and hung out. It fizzled out after a few months, and there have never been any hard feelings. I'm actually still friends with him today.
Nice. A respectful parting of ways.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So college was where it all changed, ages 16 to 18, and where my life became very difficult. So content warning, I am now going to be describing upsetting and unsettling things, experiences, and thoughts. It says, I went to a college that was not far from my hometown. Me, my friends from school, and my sister would take the bus every morning. It always felt so much more grown up and way more independent from being in high school. We would wear our own clothes, didn't have to turn up for lessons, and there were pubs all around our college. Yes, we underage drank a little bit, and then legally when we all turned 18. There's another difference. Drinking age is 21 here.
Mm-hmm.
College is where I truly felt I could dress and express myself in ways I had always wanted to. I've always been into rock and heavy metal music and black clothing. I loved being able to wear fishnets, tartan.
Plaid.
Oh, okay. I dyed my hair bright pink and got as many piercings in my face as I wanted. I basically still dress and look like that now. But this is the place where I really felt I could be my true self and explore who I was, all in the safety of a friend group I loved and felt safe in.
I really enjoyed college mainly for the social side of it. I didn't go to my classes as often as I should have and didn't do too well in my exams. I regret not using my time in college as well as I should have. But if I'm honest, had I taken college more seriously and ended up going to university at 18 or 19, I know for a fact I'd have studied something I wasn't truly passionate about. So for that, I've forgiven myself.
That's cool. That's a good way to look at it.
It is a good way to look at it.
I totally agree. That's a lesson I've learned in the past 10 years is doing something you're passionate about makes a huge difference in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have some regrets for how I decided to spend my 20s, but can't change it now.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, she continues, at the beginning of my first year in college, on my 17th birthday, I met Tim. I was waiting at the bus station to catch the bus home when he came to talk to me. In fact, he came and sat on my knee whilst I sat with my friends. I'd seen Tim around college, and he was friends with a few people in my classes, but I didn't really notice him. I was still very much interested exclusively in my friends, the pub, going to gigs, and meeting rock stars. That's what I'm talking about. Which I kind of had a knack for back in the day, but they're more fun and nicer stories for another time. Anyway, he sat on my knee and asked my name.
Imogen, who are you?
I'm Tim. I like you. How has your day been?
Yeah, it's been fine. It's my birthday today.
Happy birthday. You're really pretty and your laugh is gorgeous. Would you like a boyfriend for your birthday?
Now, okay, I know, cringe city, but I never had anyone be like that with me, as in show me that I was in any way attractive or desirable. I've never felt attractive. So I said, yeah, okay, and then suddenly I had a boyfriend. He was really sweet and kind of awkward. I really enjoyed having attention from someone that I hadn't grown up with, but I was so naive and inexperienced. I'm not saying that as a negative towards me. I was 17, and no matter what 17-year-olds think or say, you're still so young at that age.
Mm-hmm.
I had never experienced intimacy with someone else, sex, or anything like that. I didn't know what to expect or how I should be treated.
He would touch me in intimate places when we hung out, even when we were hanging out with other people. I was uncomfortable with this, but thought if I said or did anything that I would embarrass myself. I wanted so much to be seen as this mature, desirable woman. You feel kind of like you can relate to that, Rosie?
I felt similar to that when I was with my abuser, that I was feeling so much more mature than 14-year-olds usually do.
Yeah, kids, they're sick of being kids, especially when they're going through puberty. They want to be a grown-up, you know? At least that's how I was, and it makes people extra vulnerable at that age.
Mm-hmm. The week after we started dating, he came to my house. I can't remember why or what we did as a friend group, meaning me, him, my twin sister, and our friend Kelly, but I remember what happened in my bedroom. My twin sister and I shared a room. Me, Tim, twin, sis, and Kelly were hanging out there when my sis and Kelly went downstairs to either make drinks or food. I went to leave too after a few minutes, but Tim pulled me back. He shoved me against my wardrobe door and tried to force his hands down my pants. I had a belt on that thankfully stopped him from getting into them, and I just stared. Tim, stop it.
Ugh. He said, "We're alone, and you're my girlfriend. It's what boyfriends and girlfriends do."
I tried to laugh it off, but he scared me. I was scared. We went back downstairs and probably went out to a pub or something. I really don't remember.
So that's, forceful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially when she asks him to stop. Like, no apology or anything.
And confusing, too, if he's grabbing her intimately in public.
Yeah.
As, like, a encouraging, not like a pat on the back, but, like, this is okay. This is, like, what a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship is.
Yeah. So she continues, "I can't really remember how long we were together. I think it was only a few weeks. I wasn't even sure if I was attracted to him, but I enjoyed having a boyfriend. He did once say something about getting engaged, to which I just laughed and changed the subject. He used to buy me cigarettes too, which at the time I saw as a little romantic. I had to be young."
Oh, just a quick warning. This is where things get pretty horrible. One day during college, I had some free time, so me and Tim were hanging out. There were loads of places around the college campus that you could walk and have a bit of privacy. It was in a city, but in a more residential area with alleyways and little pockets of woodland. Tim and I were around the back of one of the art blocks. I remember the smell of turpentine, chalk, and paint. It always seemed to smell like that, even outside of the building. Tim went in for a kiss, then pushed me up against a wall. I remember feeling the small, sharp stones on my back. He kissed me harder and tried again to put his hand in my underwear. I was wearing a dress. I squirmed away. "Tim, stop. Someone could look out the window." My memory is hazy, but it was then that he assaulted me. He shoved my face up against the stone wall, then down onto the grass. I remember being terrified, staring up at the art block windows, hoping and praying that someone would look out of the window and see us.
Oh my gosh. She says, "Afterwards I walked away from him to class and never spoke to him again. I ignored his texts, calls, and him trying to talk to me at college. He even tried to propose to me." What? I think he got the hint that we were no longer together after about 2 weeks. I never spoke to or saw him again, and I dropped out of college soon after. How entitled can you be to literally assault someone? They make it pretty obvious that they're offended, and then you propose to them?
I think that just shows us the character of Tim and how, he was going to be pretty aggressive in the future.
Yeah.
If that was,
oh my gosh.
if that was okay in his mind.
And a bit narcissistic.
Very.
Thick-skulled. Says, I don't remember much after that. I started drinking heavily to stop the horrible, icky feelings. I didn't want to feel or remember anything. One night, when I was out with my friends, it was late. My sister and I were walking our friend to the train station so she could go home. There was a guy there at the station, too. He was probably only in his mid-20s, and I thought he was really good looking. While we were there waiting for her train, me and him started talking. We flirted, and he just complimented me so much. Being the naive teen I was, I sort of became besotted with him. I've never heard that word before. It must be like, what's that word? Yeah, that's the word. We'd seen him most nights when my friend would get her train home. After a week or so, we partnered off to kiss somewhere private. He took me down to the railway tunnel. That was the second time I was raped. I remember his cigarette smoke breath, camo jacket, and beanie hat. Nothing else. My brain, my mind, and soul just shut down during and for a long time after. I got my mom or dad to drop me off at the train station after that. I couldn't face seeing him. We never did, though. He either got a different train or started taking the bus. It took me a really long time to be able to go to the train station without being intensely frightened. I couldn't tell my sister or friend. It happened to me again, so it must have been my fault, right? I make people do this. I couldn't tell them. They couldn't know. That's really sad. She felt responsibility for this. That these assaults that people were doing to her, and too ashamed to tell anyone about it.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, is that Imogen felt like she wasn't even able to tell her sister or her friends.
Yeah, it just eats away at you, and you have to hold that in.
Especially as a teenager, when you're so giddy and you're so full of emotions, and all of a sudden this guy that you see once in a while, or actually more than once in a while, is flirting with you, that attention, I can't even...
Yeah, and you're inexperienced, so you don't know yet that there are people out there that will take advantage of you, or,
Right.
Take advantage of your naive mindset. It was then that I really started to spiral down. I felt I was only worth attention as a sex object. My body was all that men were interested in. I partied a lot in those years. We were out most nights at pubs, bars, gigs, and clubs. If anyone ever started chatting me up, I would tell outlandish lies, who I was, what I did, my name and ambitions. No one cared about that stuff, right? They only cared about what was under my clothes and what they could do to me.
I feel like Imogen put it really well, because a lot of people who are abused in this way, they do act like this. And a lot of other people on the outside are really frustrated, and they're like, well, you're asking for it then if you're partying like this. But really, it's such a emotional and internal way to cope. Like, you just tell yourself, like, this is all I have, so I might as well just go with it.
To try to take your mind off
Try to take your mind off it. Try to make it as if you were okay with it, or talk yourself, like, I don't even know how to explain it, but I understand where she's coming from. And on a much smaller scale, I can feel like I related to that as a teenager when, all the guys were going in for a boob grab in middle school, and then that progressed to me being like, well, I guess I'm like attractive now, so this is my worth, and this is where I'm going to get my attention from.
Yeah.
So I think it's really unfair when people are like, well, no, she's a slut because she's going to all the clubs, and that's what...
Yeah, I think your point's coming across pretty well. I mean, when you start to see how other people assess your value, it's pretty easy to start assessing your own value that way.
When I wasn't out socializing in town, I was online. I found a really cool forum for a band I loved. This was in the infancy of MySpace and the heyday of Bebo. Did you ever use Bebo?
No.
Maybe that must be a UK one.
I knew friends that were on it, but my parents didn't let me use the internet.
This online message board was always fun and exciting, and if the band toured, we'd meet up with members who were in our area. It was so fun. and my sister and I had such an amazing time with them. Of course, I was still binge drinking and suffering terribly with my mental health, but I thought that's just what teenagers do, right? The angst, the hangovers, and the stupid drunken mistakes, the assaults, they were just things that happened to girls in their teens. That's genuinely what I believed. I made a lot of friends on that forum. One in particular I became quite flirty with. I'll call him Mark. There wasn't much anonymity, sorry, Ryan, on the forum. We shared pictures all the time, and I knew what most of the members who I interacted with daily looked like. We were all kind of weird, goth kids and dressed as such. There were 4 of us that went to the shows in my nearest city, and we met up every time before, after, and during concerts. We drank, rocked out, and had a great time. In true teen obsession, we'd all turn up hours before the show to socialize, then stay after the show and try to meet the band.
I used to do stuff like that. Not the drinking, but trying to meet the band. It was exciting.
Yeah. I never got to do that.
I met Angels and Airwaves. That was pretty cool. Except Tom DeLonge. He ran to the bus.
That's too bad. One such evening before the show, my friends and I were talking, and I saw Mark. I'd never met him in person before and thought he looked so cool. We got chatting and hung out during the show, but he disappeared afterwards. No worries, I thought. We'll chat on the forum tomorrow. The next day, we were all chatting about the show, and Mark popped up.
And said, "Hey, sorry I bounced after the show. I was really drunk, so I went to Jules, the local rock/goth club, until 6 a.m. I meant to ask you to come, but I forgot."
He forgot? Really? I laughed and made jokes. I wouldn't have been able to go anyway, as my sister and I had to get the last train home from the city. We continued to talk about the show when he popped up into my IMs. Remember when that's what DMs were called?
Yeah, instant messengers.
I don't even remember that.
Really?
Not really. He said that he loved meeting me and that he really fancied me and would love to see me again. I was quite shocked, but really excited. This guy was so sweet and funny. Surely he couldn't be like the others. I don't know if I was just a little blindsided that he liked me, or I was just desperate to be proven wrong that all men were horrible, sexual bullies, but we agreed to meet the following weekend in the city.
Wow. I mean, you can't give up on people, but, it's hard out there when there's so many people that are trying, so many people with bad intentions, because you don't want to just write everyone off and assume everyone's terrible.
Right. I'm just assuming Mark's terrible because he said he forgot to invite her. Come on, really? You forgot? But that's just me.
Yeah. She continues, "I was so nervous but excited. My sister Kelly and I took the train to the city and went to meet Mark. There's a popular hangout place in the city for alternative people. We loved going there to meet new friends and hanging out with people who were like us. It's still that place now, though a bit more TikTok-y than it used to be. I still dress alternative, but I feel so old when I walk through that place. I feel that. I get it. The office for my work is in that city, and I go there once a month for meetings. I always walk through the hangout area to get there from the station. It's nostalgic."
We sat right in the middle and waiting for Mark to arrive. He came ambling over not long after we got there. It's still a little blurry for me, but I think we all sat there for about an hour, just chatting and laughing, but there seemed to be something a little off with him. It's like he was high or drunk. He was so animated, joking around, but also kind of detached. It's hard to describe really, but we were having a good time. After a while, he and I decided to go for a walk together as a couple, so we could get to know each other a little bit better, away from my sister and friend. We walked around the city a bit, mainly to the back roads and streets. It was broad daylight, so I wasn't nervous, not one bit. We were chatting, and he admitted he was extremely drunk. He had drunk an entire bottle of liquor before meeting me.
Whoa.
He was wasted. He then proceeded to show me self-harm scars, recent ones, that he'd done to himself when his last partner had broken up with him. He did it to himself to win her back. Not amazing first date conversation. That's pretty much what I just read that and what I'm feeling in my head. This is not going well.
Yeah, this guy's got some baggage.
But that's when I got scared. He was getting more and more upset. It was obvious he was absolutely drunk out of his face. I really like that expression. Why hadn't I noticed when we were in a group? We were walking behind a restaurant. It was completely derelict. Derelict? Is that a UK thing, or do we say that?
It's like abandoned.
Okay. He then dragged me back to the doorway, pushed his hands up my skirt. Stop. What are you doing?
And he said, sorry, I just don't know what to do with my hands.
Oh.
Whatever, dude. She continues, he started kissing me. He wasn't much taller than me, but I was very underweight then, tiny. At that age, I was just under 5'8" and about 84 pounds.
Whoa. That's
6 stone.
Super thin.
The previous traumas had resulted in my developing an eating disorder. That, paired with him being drunk, I guess, meant he overpowered me easily.
He pushed back against the wall and assaulted me. This was the only time I was able to completely detach myself from my body. I don't remember the feeling of it happening. I was focused on the brick against my face and the tarmac of the road, and that was it. Nothing more.
Oh my gosh, so many assaults. And she went into this survival mode, just like completely disassociated with what was happening. And
Well, not to mention it's broad daylight and they're just taking a walk. And she had her sister was there too with her and a friend. So it wasn't like she just met up with this guy on her own in the dark alleyway of the bad part of this town,
Well, yeah, this is the last thing she expected in the middle of the day.
But she was taking precautions and being safe.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I straightened myself out and walked away. He'd passed out on the floor after, and for all I cared, he could get robbed and beaten up by a passerby. I left him and went back to my friends, citing him having to go home. Then we left the city.
Oh, again, she felt like she had to hold it in.
That one was the worst of them all. And you know why? Because he didn't remember doing it. As far as I know now, he still doesn't remember what he did to me that day. The next day, he messaged me on the forum, and I ignored his messages and carried on interacting with the others on the message board. He put up a thread about being mistreated in relationships and how he was destined to never find love.
Oh my God.
Because everyone he ever met was cruel to him, treated him like dirt, and ghosted him. Can you believe that? It was glaringly obvious to me that he didn't remember.
Oh my gosh. This guy is messed up and just expects everyone to bend to, cater to his... I mean, he was completely wasted and he did this horrible thing and then he blames other people for it.
If he feels the need to put up these articles about being mistreated or these threads, then obviously maybe he has a very bad drinking problem if he's doing this and can't remember.
Yeah.
If he actually couldn't remember. Ugh.
Well, and just looking for pity and attention from other people, even though he did this horrible thing. A week or so passed, and he continued to message me. I replied only once, chickening out of telling him what had actually happened, and told him that he had turned up drunk and told me he didn't want to be with me. I could tell he didn't really believe me, but then we became enemies, as it were. He would post and comment on various threads about his hard time with romance. I was completely disgusted with him, but also extremely frightened. If I met him again, I knew he was capable of hurting me. But I was also ashamed. I felt weak, stupid. How on earth had I managed to let this happen to me again? No one would believe me. There were still those on the forum who liked him and thought he was cool. Some even knew that I was the one who was responsible for his quote-unquote heartache. The problem was obviously me. I had somehow made him do that to me. What do you think of that, Rosie?
I think no, that this is not her fault. And again, why would you even think that this wasn't going to happen? Like, this was broad daylight, and she brought her friend and her sister, and, like, they went for a walk from the group. Like,
yeah.
No.
It's so sad to me that this was her happy place. This was the forum that she liked to hang out. She had a lot of friends on there. And he ruined that because he took it and turned it into this place where he would basically get sympathy from other people for never being able to find love, while the whole time she knows that he assaulted her. And it had to be so hard. And the fact that her brain kind of turned off while it was happening and decided not to remember it, it's like, it's really sad because it shows just the level of trauma it caused her. And then after that, she had to watch this happen and believe it was her fault.
Right. I saw him only once more after that. The members of the message board who frequented and were close to the city decided to have a meetup, and I decided to go. I thought I didn't have a valid reason not to go. I was part of the group online and was pretty popular. Crazy to think now that I saw that as important enough that it was my duty to go to meetups. I wasn't going to tell anyone what he did to me. Why couldn't I go? So I had to go. We were mostly of drinking age by this time, so had decided to go to some of the alternative pubs. We met outside the train station. My heart was in my mouth. I was hoping and wishing that he wouldn't turn up. But he did. I felt sick and scared. I didn't want to be there, but we'd made the trip to the city and I wanted to hang out with my other friends. Plus, the aforementioned duty I'd put upon myself. We had a few drinks. Mark and another member of our group got close and got very cozy by the end of the evening. I was frightened for her, but though he had a couple of drinks, he was nowhere near as bladdered as he'd been when I met up with him. That's a new word for me.
Yeah, this story is horrible, but
Bladdered
I do appreciate the new...
to plastered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do appreciate the new words we're learning because, just different culture.
They dated for a really long time after that. Longer than 10 years, I believe. She ended up hating me and obviously took his side in everything. I didn't have the courage to correct her or anyone else, so I didn't. I ended up dating another member of our group for a while, and he was nice, but I was too damaged to form any meaningful or trusting relationship with a guy. A few months after this, the online forum got shut down. Not entirely sure the reason, but one day it just wasn't there anymore. The people I'd met there, we all sort of drifted apart. A few of us went to the other online communities, and I'm actually still friends with a couple of them on social media. It's quite nice to reminisce with them occasionally and remember the good times that we shared on there. I continued to go out a lot, drink a lot, and party more and more. My friends and I would be in pubs or bars most weekday nights if I wasn't working. I was a bar staff at a local pub. And if I was working, my colleagues and I would have a few drinks after work and socialize. I didn't want to be in my own head. It was a very dark place. And even though I was aware of mental illness, it never occurred to me that I might be suffering because of what I'd been through. I just tried to carry on as quote-unquote normal.
But let me now talk about the aforementioned eating disorder. It started not long after the first assault. Growing up, I had always been slim. I used to get called all sorts of names at school because I was so skinny. I hate that word. It didn't bother me too much. I liked being slim and tall. I felt elegant sometimes. After I was first assaulted, I felt like I had completely lost control of my life, of everything. Now I know that during this entire period, I was clearly very mentally unwell, but I just didn't think about it. I stopped eating. I was never hungry, and not eating was basically my way of controlling just one tiny portion of my life. I realize this all now in hindsight. At the time, I just hated myself, my body, and wanted to punish myself for being weak and stupid. I started self-harming in small ways. Never anything that didn't heal quickly, but the not eating stayed. I drank coffee, alcohol, and ate as little as I could get away with at the dinner table. I didn't eat too much at home anyways. Being out all the time, I would tell my parents that I had food with my friends or after work. No one even really noticed, to be honest. I was always skinny. To this day, I have a very difficult relationship with food.
Maybe you can relate to that more than me.
Yeah, just, it's hard when you're in this mindset where you hate your body, or, you have a problem with yourself and you are constantly trying to get to the spot that you think you need to be socially acceptable. And I mean, especially when there's body image involved, it's just like it can really distort your thinking and make you justify certain things that aren't healthy for you and aren't good for you in the long run. But yeah, it's a rough one.
Yeah.
It was shortly after this time that I met my husband. I had worked at the pub for about 5 years, and we had a couple of new guys start one Sunday evening shift. My sister and I were in the pub just after our afternoon shift and decided to stay a bit after and chill out. One of the new guys walked past, and I was instantly smitten. There's that word. I won't go into too much detail as I don't want to give away too much personal information, but we started dating not long after meeting. We had not been together a year when my family decided to move down to London. I didn't really want to go. I didn't want to leave my new boyfriend, who was just starting university, and I didn't want to leave all my friends. But I was 20, working part-time in a pub, and couldn't afford not to go along. So my sisters, my parents, and I moved south. I tried to see it as an amazing opportunity to see new places, experience new things, meet new people, and maybe even find a direction in life. I loved where I lived, my job, and obviously my relationship, but I didn't have much planned for myself in the town I had lived most of my life.
We were there for 3 years, and apart from what had happened to me before, they were the worst 3 years of my life. I won't go into too much detail, really. I think the story is already far too long. But there are things I need to include to give you the whole picture. I was a lot shyer back then, my early 20s, than I am now. I've worked really hard on myself to be the person I am today, and I'm not ashamed to say that I'm proud of myself for it. Good for you. I'm glad she said that.
Yeah.
I managed to find a job in a cocktail bar in a town outside of London. I absolutely loved this job and really thrived. I felt I was given an opportunity to reinvent myself and come out of my shell.
I love that she said this because it does take a lot of hard work to get back to a healthy place after all these kind of things happen to you and the different things she struggled with. From the assaults and the eating disorder, just it's a difficult trap, and it does take a lot of work. So I have a lot of respect for anyone that can overcome these type of things and become functional again.
The people I met at my job didn't know who I was, where I had come from, or what I had experienced. I was just the pink-haired northerner in a southern town. The accents and some cultural differences are quite marked here in the UK. The way I said certain things, turns of phrase, and my broad northern accent was a real part of my identity, and I loved it.
Interesting.
I had such an amazing time, but it didn't last. The bar closed down after I was there for just over a year, and that hit me, and all of us, pretty hard. Suddenly, I was jobless, moneyless, friendless, and a long way from my hometown and boyfriend. I didn't save any of my money as I spent most of it visiting my boyfriend at university on my days off. I think the distraction of friends, a great job, and a sense of purpose maybe stopped me thinking about my traumas. I didn't have many quiet moments. I didn't let myself be in my own head, which was becoming a very dark and scary place. To be suddenly without these distractions, I had no choice. I sank into an almost bottomless depression. It was like everything that I had avoided, thinking about, facing, remembering, and dealing with became these huge, horrible monsters that I had no choice but to battle with every single day. I completely withdrew from my family. At this time, my twin moved out, as did my younger sister. Being away from them made me feel much more isolated. I didn't speak to anyone. I told my parents nothing, rarely ate, and couldn't afford to see my boyfriend. It was at this time that I started to self-harm. I'd injured myself in the past, but never anything serious. But nothing else would make my emotional pain go away. Still at this time, by now I was 23, I wasn't medicated or had ever seen a therapist. So I started to burn my skin. I won't talk too much about it as I know it's a triggering subject, but it was from this age to then in my early 30s that I self-harmed on a very regular basis. I'm nearly 4 years clean from self-harm, something I'm rather proud of.
Wow. Good for you,
Oh.
Imogen, for getting out of that situation.
And I haven't really heard of that type of self-harm before. That sounds very painful.
I can't imagine the emotional pain that you'd have to feel to want to do this to yourself. It's not something I can relate to or even imagine.
No, me neither.
Oh.
Well, we congratulate you in your 4 years.
Yeah, nice work. Because it's got to take a lot of work when you're something. I mean, just like the eating disorder, when you have this kind of habit, to be able to stay clean and stay away from it it's hard to break those kind of habits.
Mm-hmm. One night I was on the phone with my boyfriend. I missed him so much. I hadn't seen him for weeks, and as the cordless phone started beeping, indicating that it needed to be charged, I tearfully said goodbye to him and sat on my front doorstep. It was a cold night, but I didn't want to go inside. This house had become a prison, and going inside and up into my tiny, lonely room was just a bit too much. I had been having suicidal thoughts regularly, and now, sitting in the dark with nothing but my own traumas and hurting skin to keep me company, I fantasized about going to sleep and never waking up. I heard a noise and looked up to see someone with their hood pulled up coming towards me. He grabbed my arm and put his hand over my mouth, dragging me roughly toward the alley next to my house.
Oh my God.
This time I didn't freeze. I barely knew what was happening before I wrenched free, punching him in the stomach and running back to my house. I still had the house phone in my hand, so I dialed 999 and asked for help. I couldn't stop crying from shock, from the scratched face I had and the realization that once again I had allowed myself to be a target. I didn't know and still had no idea what his intentions were with me. I was in such shock I struggled to talk to the police and tell them what I saw of my attacker. This time, though, my parents were there. As the police drove up, I woke them and told them what had happened to me.
Can you imagine this happening and still feeling like
again
it was your fault?
Happening.
So many times. It's hard to believe that could happen this many times, and like up until this point, no one else knew about it. You know, only because the police were there now. You know, she had to tell her parents what happened, but I'm glad that she finally was able to tell someone about one of these attacks.
Right. After that, I didn't get out of bed for a whole week. I feigned illness, but I know that my parents knew it was because of what had happened. If I couldn't even sit on my own front doorstep without becoming a victim again, then why even bother leaving my bedroom? I started hoarding painkillers. I had them in a box under my bed. I truly believed the only reason I am still alive today is because I told my boyfriend. He He threatened to call the emergency services if I didn't flush them down the toilet right then, and I did.
Wow.
The very next day, I made an appointment to see my doctor about getting therapy.
Now, that shows that this is someone who cares about her.
Right.
Like, he was going to make sure that she was taken care of, even if it was tough love, you know?
That was the beginning of my very long road to seeking help, being diagnosed, and finally being medicated. I started therapy down there and saw someone for a number of weeks.
Do you want me to read for a bit, Rosie?
Sure.
She continues, "It wasn't too long after this that my family decided to move back home. I was overjoyed. The depth of my depression was still extremely low, but I was seeing a therapist. I wasn't allowed to be medicated because I admitted to hoarding pills once. But all I could think about was going home, back to my family home, and being around my friends again. I didn't see anyone that I had previously worked with at the bar anymore, so I was still very much isolated. One night just before we moved home, I went to the pub that my sister worked at. I can't remember why I went, but I think I may have just been lonely and fed up with being indoors almost all the time. The night started well enough, but ended with someone I knew spending roughly 3 hours verbally attacking, abusing, and belittling me. He followed me around wherever I went to tell me what a worthless piece of trash he thought I was. It says I won't use the language he did. It's disgusting and incredibly triggering for me. I was scum. Worse than scum. I didn't deserve to have someone as amazing as my sister in my life, and I deserved every single bad thing that has ever happened to me." That's... Who would do this? Why would this person do this?
Yeah, this... Oh.
Well, she continues, "He was drunk, I think. I'm not saying that as an excuse for how he was, but I imagine he would never remember following me outside into the beer garden, sitting next to and putting his face right up to mine and telling me how pathetic I was, how he hated me and hated even looking at me. It went on like this as the night went on." Oh my God. Okay, this person is clearly working with really bad information.
Right.
How could you even think that about another person? But I just, backing up a bit, like, it just hit me that all these different times that she was assaulted happened in completely different scenarios. Like, first, none of the places are places you would expect to be assaulted. But, I mean, this last time was right on her front step. Like,
right.
You can't even be at home and feel safe. And that kind of puts to rest that excuse. Like, people will sometimes make excuses like, well, you shouldn't have been there if you didn't.
Wrong place at the wrong time.
I think it's a ridiculous excuse because you should be able to go anywhere you want without another human being assaulting you. But the fact that she was at home, it reminds me of Elizabeth Smart, like taken right out of her own bedroom. And it just goes to show you, you're never really safe no matter where you are. But, not to go down that, or not to be too dark, but yeah. It's really sad that she was blaming herself, and then that this person made her feel like this.
She says, "I don't remember everything, and I will never let myself remember them. But I walked home from that night alone, in the dark, in the middle of the countryside. I almost threw myself off of a bridge in the freezing canal water. I just didn't want to live. I can't think of this night often, as I haven't ever dealt with it. Writing it down was painful. It felt like I just couldn't take it anymore. I was tired of feeling nothing. I cried all the way home. which was about a 5-mile walk. And honestly, I didn't care if I made it back or just died on the path that night. We lived in a pretty rural place, and the walk home was along a dark canal in the middle of the fields. It was a freezing night, but I just couldn't feel anything anymore.
Thank you for sharing this with us, Imogen, because she said writing it down was painful. Like, I really appreciate that she was able to open up to us about this and let us share it with our audience, because this is obviously something really difficult for her to talk about and to remember happening to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, and I hope that hearing us talk about it is therapeutic to you, and I know it'll be helpful for other people.
Right.
So we really appreciate that. And if anyone else wants to share their appreciation, email us so we can pass the message on. Because I really appreciate it. All right, but that's not the end. Rosie, do you want to continue?
No, I'm aware I'm coming across as so woe is me, and I hope people listening to this don't think that all I've ever seen myself is one of life's victims. Honestly, I don't, I promise. These were just some of the worst years of my life. I know I had a good family life. I didn't struggle with neglect or anything, but I was young. I look back now and think I was so young and had to deal with so much in such a short space of time. I look back now that I'm in my 30s, and honestly say that I am not that person anymore. I've come so far and grown so much, and I'm 100% stronger now than I ever was in my relative youth.
That's amazing. And the fact that she's so self-aware, like, horrible things did happen to her, and she was a victim. Like, these are real tragedies in her life. There's, certain people out there that try to play the victim, like Jussie Smollett's situation and stuff like that,
Right.
that are a total slap in the face to people who actually have gone through things like this. So, Imogen, don't feel like you're coming across as like asking for pity or woe is me,
No, but I do appreciate this paragraph because it's true. It's like, if we're sharing our story, especially on this podcast, we're going to share the dirty bits, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean we don't realize that we have a good family or good friends or, now a good life.
Yeah.
It's just getting all the grit out there.
Yeah, and that's why I appreciate our listeners sharing their stories with us, and that we have this community and platform, because don't ever feel like you're, complaining too much. Or, I mean, that's what we're here for. That's why we're sharing these stories, is, like Rosie said, to talk about the difficult things that have happened. And, yeah, I just want to make sure she doesn't feel like she's been going on too much about the horrible things that have happened, or
Right.
That she's like pity me or something like that.
No, not at all. She goes back on to say, but something happened not long ago. As I was still writing this, actually, I found Mark on social media. Now, I've never tried to find or track down any of my past abusers before, but when the first lockdown happened here in the UK, my mental health declined quite rapidly. Not through lack of trying. I tried so hard to be positive and stay busy. I work from home anyways, so my work didn't change. I started blogging, exercising more, but slowly my mental health crumbled. I felt extremely isolated from my usually very close family and struggled with not seeing them. I was already in self-destructive mode when I decided to try to find Mark online. I know those days.
Yeah.
I chose him because he was the one that I fought hardest in therapy to overcome and get through my PTSD. I had conquered him and the memories I had. I found him on Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, and Twitter. I became obsessed with him and what I found about him. Going through his feeds, I realized he clearly had no idea what he had did to me that day, and no time in the years that had passed did he ever remember what he had put me through. He just carried on with his life. That absolutely crushed me. How can he carry on with his whole life completely ignorant to the pain he had caused me? It was like I didn't even exist, and what he did to me and the fallout from it never happened. I foolishly started following him on Instagram, and he followed me back. Oh, not good. He messaged asking if we'd ever met or if we knew each other, and I ignored those messages. Also not good.
Oh my gosh.
He even liked a post I made with a poem I had written about him and the others who have assaulted or raped me. He liked it.
Oh my. He's completely... He has no idea the emotional trauma and turmoil that he's caused.
Mm-hmm. The obsession became so bad that I barely ate, barely slept, and spent hours each day on my phone looking at all of his accounts. I became very mentally unwell because of this, and it became an obsession. I even saw that he was at a concert my husband and I were at late last year. I felt sick. I didn't know what to do. I just couldn't get over the fact that he had no repercussions for what he did. I didn't want to tell my husband, as I'd always shielded him from the identities of my past abusers. I didn't want to hurt him, and he was busy and stressed at the time anyway due to work, his family, and the coronavirus. I didn't want to add to it. It got to the point he just outright asked me what was wrong, and I couldn't lie to him. Not the only person in the whole world who hadn't ever hurt me or taken advantage of me, who had in the years we've been together and helped me heal so many of my past wounds. I told him. I asked him if he wanted to see him, and he did. We worked through it, even though I wanted to go to therapy. But that was basically impossible during lockdown. I'm still not 100% okay with this situation. I'm still furious at the guy for being blissfully unaware of his past. But I don't sit every day on his profile. I check every so often, and when I do, I always tell my husband after. I know I should block him. I know I'd just eventually unblock and start the obsession again. I'm hoping after all this pandemic stuff is over, I can go back to therapy.
I really hope that she's able to go back to therapy again soon, because this pandemic's been so hard on so many people, and I mean the illness is one thing, but then there's all this collateral damage from people whose lives are just completely thrown off because, I mean, having to stop going to therapy, that's devastating for people with mental illness, plus the whole isolation thing and way too much time. I mean, having too much time on her hands was a problem for her in the past when she moved away from her original hometown for that time. And then now it's forced on her again during this pandemic, and it's just, it's a rough time.
Yeah, and I only say, like, I have those days, like, totally separately, but only in the same sense where I creep on my abuser once in a while. But it's different because, like, I can't even use my own account for that because he knows my real name and has me blocked on all stuff, so I'll only use the VoV account to creep on him.
Yeah, and he
knows what he did.
Yeah.
And he doesn't not know. So, like, I can't even imagine
that sounds...
him, like, completely denying or not remembering.
Not even acknowledging.
That would be so...
frustrating.
I'm trying to think of a word that means raging.
Oh.
Like, I would just be
raging?
So vengeful. Or, like, Are you serious? Like, you don't know what happened here?
Livid?
Livid, yeah. That's a good word for it. There obviously is no the end at the end of this story. It still goes on. In the 17 years since my first trauma, and the 10 years since the last stories, I have lived and worked in France, been to university, got married. My boyfriend is now my husband of 7 years, got my dream job, and worked through my past traumas with EMDR therapy. It's not me saying that all is well. I'm cured and no longer suffer with mental illness. 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, OCD, depression, anxiety, and acute stress disorder. I still suffer with disordered eating and body image. I'm medicated and still suffer with self-harming ideation and suicidal thoughts. I've been hospitalized for self-harm and 2 suicide attempts. But I am strong, I am loved, and I am not alone. I am the person now that I needed when I was younger, and that's the main drive in sharing my story with you guys. I want someone out there, young or old, to know that trauma does not define you. You are not your mental illness, and you never ever deserve or bring on your own abuse, trauma, or mistreatment. I'm 34 now. When I was 17, I started a painful journey, but I'm still here despite my physical and mental scars. If I can make it, so can you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Imogen. I can't stress enough how much we appreciate you actually putting in the effort to do this, because we know it was really difficult for you, and we really appreciate it, and I know our listeners will appreciate it too. Imogen is a sweetheart, one of the kindest people we know. Like, she's really worked hard to be a good person and to contribute to the community and help other people. And it's really amazing that even though she's been through all of this and struggles now with all of these mental disorders and eating disorders, and she's still able to do her best to contribute to society and help people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she's got a grocery store list of stuff that she's still working through and has to deal with. But I appreciate so much, Imogen, how you're able to just throw it on your sleeve and let us all see it.
Yeah.
That there is no the end of this story yet. It's still going on, and you're still making progress, and maybe you'll relapse or have trouble still.
Yeah.
But it's an ongoing journey for you, and we really appreciate you sharing it with us so that we can share with other people.
Yeah, that's something that it's really healthy to be able to accept, is it's never the end. When you've suffered trauma and you deal with things like this, you probably will relapse in the future. It's a very real possibility, but I think being at peace with that and knowing that no matter what happens, you can get back on track and recover. I think it's better to expect roadblocks and know you can overcome them than to be like, okay, I'm healed, everything's great now.
You're too proud
and then it hits you and you fall, and it's even harder to get back up if you weren't expecting it. So
yeah, also happy to hear that you're happily married with your hubby.
The fact that you could have gone through all these things and still value relationships and marriage and still be able to find a man who cares about you. I mean, she didn't let the suspicion or expectations get distorted because of what happened to her. She didn't hate all men. She was still able to find a man that was loving and caring and make a relationship work. I mean, obviously, he really cared about her. The fact that he was going to call for help if she didn't flush those pills.
Right.
Like, he really wanted to help her instead of taking advantage of her like the other men in her past. Right.
Superficial boyfriends would have maybe not wanted to do that because they didn't want to hurt her feelings, or, you know what I mean? But someone who really cared was able to make that tough choice and say, I'm actually going to do this.
Yeah. It's not always easy to do the right thing. But thank you, Imogen. We really appreciate you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Rosie. Well, should we wrap this up?
I think we should wrap this one up.
And just let it sit. We don't need to talk about anything else. If you appreciate Imogen's story, again, please feel free to reach out to us. Put Imogen in the subject line, and we'll forward the messages on to her.
Yeah, or comments on our Instagram post for this week.
Yeah.
It'd be easy for her to see your support and your comments for this episode.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.